Welcome to True Crime Chronicles. Japan has a low crime rate, safe neighborhoods, and close-knit communities that watch out for each other. Japan's rate of deliberate homicide is 0.3, second lowest in the world according to the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, compared to 5.4 in the US. Despite this, Japan has rare and violent crimes that shock and surprise the globe. Tsutomu Miyazaki, a man from Saitama, Japan, abducted 4 girls aged 4 to 7 and murdered, sexually raped, and ate some of their body parts and blood, earning him the epithet Little Girl Murderer. The media called him the Otaku Killer because he liked horror and violent comics. Japanese otaku means nerd. Miyazaki loved small girls. He sexually assaulted their corpses. His love of anime and horror influenced his killings. How severe was his mental health disorder if he drank his victims' blood and ate their flesh? How was he caught? Tsutomu Miyazaki's life and misdeeds shook a nation and the world. Misdeed. He asked the girl, "Would you like to go somewhere cool?" She consented and hopped into his car. On August 22nd, 1988, Marie, 4, left her home in Saitama, Japan to see a friend. Her father reported her missing when she didn't return that evening. One man hid her. Tsutomu Miyazaki, who lived near Marie, observed the girl the day after his 26th birthday. Marie agreed, took his hand, and climbed into his car. In Japan, children are taught to respect and obey elders, and kidnappings and crime were minimal in the 1980s and 1990s in Saitama, so Miyazaki was able to take Marie into his car and drive her to an isolated spot and park beneath a bridge. He took her to a woodland and watched her play for 30 minutes before murdering her. After she died, he undressed and raped her body. He stole her clothes and left her body in the field. Marie's family received a postcard after she disappeared saying, "There are devils about." 50,000 posters featuring Marie's face were posted in Japanese train stations and bus stops. 2 boys and a housewife reported seeing Marie with an overweight late 30s man with curly hair. Marie's family received unusual 20-minute phone calls. When the family responded, the caller hung up or breathed heavily. The case became cold after weeks without leads. No corpse, witnesses, or evidence linked anyone to the disappearance. Miyazaki's murders became bolder and more severe as he progressed. On October 3rd, 1988, 6 weeks after Marie's abduction, Miyazaki saw Masami Yoshizawa, a first grader. He drove her to the hills near his first murder and strangled her. He stripped the corpse and raped it. He stole her clothes and left her body less than 100 meters from Marie's. Police quickly linked Marie and Masami because they resided in the same area, but no clothes or bodies were found. Thus, Masami was also labeled as missing. Masami's family also received unusual crank calls from a caller who never spoke. Miyazaki enticed Erika Namba into his vehicle on December 12, 1988. When he arrived, she was crying. He urged Erika to strip in the back seat, then photographed her. Erika was strangled, tied and wrapped in a sheet like Marie and Masami. This time, he threw away her clothing instead of keeping them. His car skidded and became trapped when he was transporting Erika's body. He removed the body from the trunk and dumped it into the woods. 2 males were standing outside his abandoned car when he returned with just the sheet. Miyazaki's automobile was stuck, so they helped him push it out. Erika's family received weird phone calls and a mail reading Erika: cold, cough throat, death. Miyazaki couldn't dispose of Erika's body because of car trouble. Her clothes and body were found days after her death. The 2 men claimed seeing Miyazaki and described his automobile, but couldn't remember the make, so neither could be identified. All 3 nearby girls were kidnapped and killed, it was revealed. Police had only located Erika's body, but they believed the other females were also dead. Police formed a special force to search for the other 2 girls' bodies. While authorities searched for the girls and the serial killer, Miyazaki recovered Marie's body, hacked off her hands and feet, and burned the rest in his furnace. He delivered the burnt remnants, Marie's baby teeth, and photos of her outfits with the note, "Marie, bones, cremated, investigate truth. Dr. Kazuo Suzuki of the Tokyo Dental University's legal division found the ashes did not belong to Marie. Miyazaki had to correct the examiner's report that the remains weren't Marie's. Marie sent a letter and a Polaroid to Asahi Shimbun. The letter was signed with a fictitious name, Yuko Imada, which means "I'll tell you now" in Japanese. Letter confessed, "I dumped Marie's remains in a cardboard box outside her house. Did everything through the Marie incident. I observed at the police press conference that Marie's remains weren't found. Her mother remarked on camera that the report gave her hope Marie was alive. I knew I had to confess, so Marie's mother wouldn't keep hoping. Marie's remains. Medical examination proved the remains were Marie's, missing hands and feet. At Marie's funeral, her father asked the perpetrator, 'Where are her hands and feet? She can't walk or eat in heaven. Please return her ashes.' Although the authorities couldn't identify the killer from the text, the photo, postcard paper, and box sent were a hint. Miyazaki grew braver and more determined after his close call with Erika. On June 1st, 1989, he again recruited an elementary school girl. People observed him taking pictures and removing her underwear and chased him away. Miyazaki found 5-year-old Ayako alone in a park a few days later. He invited her to pose with his camera. He handed her gum in his car to keep her calm. The girl commented on Miyazaki's malformed hands, he said. Miyazaki's hand joints fused together at birth, limiting his hand movement. Miyazaki used vinyl gloves in anger. Here's what happens to youngsters who say that, he added, then strangled her. She kicked for 4 or 5 minutes, then became limp, he said. He taped her mouth and bound her hands with vinyl rope to make sure she was dead, then wrapped her body with a sheet and put it in the trunk. Instead of discarding her body like the other 3, he brought hers home. He stripped her body, wiped her with a towel, opened her legs and taped her vagina open. He then went on to film the body while he masturbated. He then took a knife and sawed off her head, hands and feet. He placed the remains beside a public toilet at a cemetery, then roasted Ayoko's hands, which he proceeded to eat and drank part of her blood. He kept some bones and her head in his home till later scattered them in the woods. He then burnt her hair, clothes and the blood-stained plastic bags he'd used to transport her. Ayako's mother had reported her missing on June 6th, and a week later, Ayako's corpse was located. Using blood type, chest size and stomach contents, investigators were able to confirm the body belonged to Ayako. Despite the sightings of Miyazaki and his automobile by the 2 men earlier, and the clues from the package he had sent the victims' families, Miyazaki was still able to elude detection, and authorities were nowhere close to identifying their serial killer. Luckily, despite the police still having no leads, Miyazaki's appetite for new victims ultimately was his end. On July 23, 1989, Miyazaki came upon 2 sisters playing outside. He got the younger sister to accompany him to the river, where he could shoot shots of her. The older sister, however, went home and notified her father, who came sprinting to save his younger daughter. The father ended up finding the young girl naked while Miyazaki was snapping shots between her legs. He approached, knocked Miyazaki down, but Miyazaki was able to flee to his car. Luckily, the police had been summoned and were waiting for him beside his car. I felt completely alone, and anytime I watched a tiny girl playing on her own, it was almost like seeing myself. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born in Tokyo on August 21, 1962. He was born early, weighing barely 2.2 kilograms or 4.8 pounds, with a congenital abnormality that caused the joints of his hands to fuse together. The disfigurement was a main point of bullying he endured when he was a child. His classmates and instructor all stated he was a timid and lonely child who had problems establishing friends. Despite his alienation from others, he was a smart student and the first student from his junior high school to pass the entrance test to a prestigious high school. And though he was a good student, in high school he started losing interest in studies and instead decided to sit alone and draw comics. Originally, he'd planned to major in English and become a teacher, but when his marks plummeted and his enthusiasm in school diminished, he was no longer able to attend the institution his school was linked with, and so he ended up doing a photo technician degree at junior college. Miyazaki's father was a pretty wealthy and prominent businessman who controlled a printing firm and the local newspaper. Through his father's contacts, he was able to secure work at a printing plant. It seems that Miyazaki did not get along well with his family. Both his mother and father seemed to be too busy to pay him much attention. He revealed to police, "If I tried to talk to my parents about my concerns, they just shrugged me off. I even thought about suicide." Even Miyazaki's two younger sisters, Setsuko and Haruko, didn't like him. Miyazaki was a disturbed child, and there was an instant when his younger sister yelled at him for staring at her bare body while she was in the bath. Angered by her, he burst in and slammed her skull against the bathtub. He also beat his mother once when she suggested he discontinue reading comics and watching movies and do something more useful. His violent habits also included brutality to animals. "I've killed cats, threw one in the river, did another with hot water." He also strangled his own dog to death with a strand of wire. Miyazaki seemed to only get along with his grandfather, who ended up passing away in May of 1988, a few months before Miyazaki took his first human life. According to a specialist, Mr. Serizawa, his grandfather had been his last warm adult contact, and the death represented the dissolution of Miyazaki's remaining bonds with society. Miyazaki later revealed that he even ate some of his grandfather's cremated bones. He intended to reincarnate his grandfather and believed that this reincarnation would not be complete if some of his grandfather's body remained. Along with friction with his sister and mother, Miyazaki avoided ladies his own age. His penis is no thicker than a pencil and no longer than a toothpick, a high school classmate noted. His early birth, hand defect, and other physical and mental problems drove Miyazaki to act out in unexpected ways. At college, he took cameras to the tennis courts to take crotch photos of female players. He also soon tired of adult pornography. In Japan, both magazine and film pornography black out or blur pubic hair. They blank out the most crucial part, Miyazaki complained. So he turned to kid porn, which displays everything since obscenity laws limit the showing of pubic hair, not sex organs. After Miyazaki's arrest, authorities searched his home to uncover 6,000 videotapes of kiddie porn, horrible horror flicks, and anime. His collection also featured videos and images of his victims. After information about Miyazaki was leaked, there was a lot of controversy regarding horror movies, violence in anime, and pornography, with many people vilifying anime and manga culture. Dubbed the otaku killer, many single males who are preoccupied with manga, anime, video games, and pornography were looked at in a terrible way. Japanese society was condemning anime entertainment and youth culture, and blaming it for the emergence of Miyazaki. Just way hip-hop and heavy metal was blamed for the downfall of society in North America. Originally, Miyazaki was seized on the accusation of inducing a minor to conduct indecent acts when he was spotted photographing the younger sister. However, once he was in police custody and probed, Miyazaki admitted to murdering Ayako. Then, as authorities delved more, other admissions followed, involving the murder of Erika Namba and Mari Kono. Both Marie and Erika's videos were located in the collection at Miyazaki's home. After a preliminary psychological test by psychiatrists found that Miyazaki had no immediately visible abnormalities, he finally confessed to killing Masami as well. Masami's remains were found in the jungle as well as the chewed bones of Marie's hands and feet. Miyazaki's trial commenced in March 1990, and his trial lasted 7 years. In Japanese law, if someone is proven to have no mental competence, they can't be punished, and if they have an impaired mental capacity, their punishment can be lowered. The defense team contended that Miyazaki had only a limited feeling of responsibility for his acts, and that he was unable to choose between right and wrong. "We hope to create enough of a case for the judge to condemn Miyazaki to life in prison," stated his lawyer. However, the initial assessment deemed Miyazaki capable of taking responsibility for his conduct. The defense sought for a second evaluation, which the judge agreed to. He had 2 further examinations completed which determined that he suffered from schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder. During the trial, Miyazaki began painting images of Ratman, who he said was the real perpetrator. However, despite the evaluations, he was still sentenced to death by hanging.
宮崎勉の3名の死刑を執行しました。
れが人間としてこんなことがどうしてできるの。
The horrific murder of 4 girls to fulfill his sexual desires leaves no place for leniency. Chief Justice Tokiyasu Fujita. Miyazaki's legal team requested to have his sentence be altered to life in prison, but the upper courts and Supreme Court maintained his death sentence. Miyazaki reportedly said, "This has to be wrong. I'll be proved innocent someday." In his letter, while on death row, he also said things like, "This is absurd. That judge will be regretful. He must be an idiot." And regarding the victims, there's nothing more to say about them. I'm glad to think I accomplished a good deed. He also asked that his collection of DVDs and his automobile be restored to him, and that he be given a fatal injection like in America as opposed to hanging. He wrote, "Under the current execution procedure in Japan, death row criminals have to suffer considerable dread at the time of their execution, and consequently won't have a chance to feel sorry for what they've done. For this reason, we should move to fatal injections of the kind utilized in the United States." During the trial, Miyazaki's father declined to hire a lawyer for his son. "It wouldn't be fair to the victims," he remarked. After the trial, his father shut down his newspaper business and went into hiding. In an interview, he added, "I didn't pay more attention to the feelings of my son." After his incarceration, Miyazaki had written a furious letter to his father, blaming him for everything. And to his mother, "I've caused you tremendous sorrow. Don't forget to replace the oil on my automobile, or it will get so you can't drive it." His father committed suicide soon after Miyazaki's guilty conviction. After spending years in prison, reading his beloved comics and watching anime and movies all day anticipating his death, Miyazaki was hanged at the Tokyo detention house in 2008. Since Miyazaki was executed, and while life was suffering from mental illness and delusions, we may never know what caused a mild-mannered man to become such a horrible and ugly killer. His troubles with his parents, the impairment of his hands, the bullying and anger from his peers, all may have combined to make an unhappy and miserable childhood for Miyazaki. Despite his academic success and drive, he nevertheless was unable to escape the grief and abuse he suffered as a young child and adult. Add the fixation with video games, pornography and horror flicks, his lonely life with little human interaction might have aggravated his mental illness and led to his delusions and a peculiar love with tiny girls. And although the atrocities he performed against the 4 innocent children were quite awful and extremely morbid, luckily he was apprehended before he could get his hands on any other youngsters. Compared to some of the other weird hikikomori murderers that have haunted Japan, his victim count may be fewer, but his technique of murder is beyond comprehension. And although justice was served and Miyazaki has gone, the legacy of his odd killings continues to captivate the people of Japan and the world. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.